introduce Tim, and then we'll just jump in the games. And so if you don't know what this is a sweat session on the Spin&Go's. Tim is probably my best friend in poker, longtime friend. He's a great coach, great poker player. These days he's playing Spin&Go's for a living, and he also is the stream partner for coaching and staking. So his information is down below, his website if you're interested in that. Check that out for sure. But today is all about Spin&Go's, and Tim's going to try and improve my game while I play some live games. Yeah, I guess, Tim, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I mean, we'll just do our best to try and get you towards your 10K, 1K challenge. How far are you away, or did you already get there?
I was close yesterday. We got up to like 920, and then
Ah,
I had a bit of a bad day, but we're back down to like 810, but it's all good. Just, as you know, just a bit of variance.
you just need to spin, 3,000 times your buy-in, and you'll be golden.
Exactly.
No pressure.
Just checking the stream. Everything's okay. I just got to put the chat back on. Alright guys, so we're just one tabling, so we can talk about the hands pretty in depth.
hmm
And yeah, I'll be able to read the chat, so if you've got any questions for me or Tim, definitely let us know. And so I'm just going to play how I would play, and then, maybe after the hand, Tim might be able to correct me. So with this small pair, I mean, I think I'm just going to shove, like, because it plays pretty bad out of position. So it's like a huge jam, but
hmm
with this pair, I feel like this is the correct play without any reads. Would you agree with that?
hmm Yeah, I certainly think it's fine. I mean, um, your hand is face up, when you do that, so you'll get called. Well, by competent players, you're going to get called by probably any pair above, fives or sixes without much thought. But it's not exploitable really. So, I think, you know, if you believe that your opponent is a bad player, I would tend to min raise just because I want to get into a min raise dynamic with them where we're playing pots. Um, but I think in a vacuum, it can never be a bad play.
Yeah. Okay, so we completed the King 9 off, three-way,
Yep,
and we just donk layered for value. He just calls. I think I can lead twice for value against Jack X and draws, and then check call river when it bricks, so that would be my line
yep,
here.
yep.
We're obviously bet folding if he raises in this spot. Yeah, so all the draws miss, all the straight draws. So, I mean, yeah, we're just going to check call river. He checks back, so he has a jack pretty much
He has a
100% here.
jack, I guess, or queen 10 maybe.
Wow, he
Jack
had the
5,
flush draw
okay.
as well. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you see what these guys are limping on the button, um, you can, start to think about ISOing that kind of hand. You know,
Okay.
probably if I had queen
Well, I think you're lagging a little bit, Tim.
10 there, I would be raising, so king 9 is kind of, pretty close. Um, just sort of flip to flop. Okay. So what I've got at the moment is your king 3 hand, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I
Okay,
think it's just
super.
a Skype call a little bit, but it's alright, it's good
Okay.
now. So we know that he's limping
Okay.
pretty weak, so I'm just gonna like bluff raise, I guess, and
Yep.
I don't really love this board, so I'm thinking of just checking back. Because he's so short, he can check, shove a lot. Would you agree checking back this board?
I'd probably bet it myself just because there's enough high cards on there that with all of his, hands like, you know, 6-7 or 8-9, he's probably just check folding, and our hand isn't going to be strong enough to call a turn bet. So, yeah, I mean, he can check shove, but I don't mind bet folding my king high there. So, if he's going to check shove, any pair plus all his draws, that's okay by me. So I'll tend to bet there with my whole range probably. If he were like a reg, I would probably check back and be giving up because I'd expect him to be limp calling lots more, you know, Broadway connecting cards. Whereas I think this guy, when you saw him with the Jack 5 suited, he can really have any two there and probably enough hands that are frightened of all those high cards.
Yeah, okay. So because we know that he's limping really wide, I can just bet those Broadway boards because he's not, not a tight player, not necessarily going to hit him very often.
Yeah, I think so.
So I think re shoving with the ace nine off here is just the best play, three-handed.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Yep, this is Tim64 on the screen. That's correct. So chip EV, I think I just shove. I mean, I could get into a limp dynamic, but I feel like this is a profitable shove, so I'm just gonna do it, I guess. But would you limp there?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's a really marginally profitable shove. So I'd be tempted to lip stab it against, an unknown likely recreational player, just because I feel like when you've done all the hard work of building up your huge chip lead, if you can play in a way that maintains that chip lead for as long as possible, rather than kind of forcing him to make close calls or folds. I'd rather do that against bad people. I'd definitely be shoving that against, competent regs maybe, but against him, he's probably going to fold to the min raise enough that that's even, maybe even preferable to, um, shoving.
All right, cool. So heads up now, 20 big blinds. I
Yep.
guess my default against unknowns is just to min raise any two until they start adjusting. Would you say that's a good starting point, or would you prefer like limping the bottom of your range with 20 big blinds?
I'd probably prefer limping the very bottom of my range, just because, I mean, you probably can show that raising is profitable, whether it's more profitable to raise or limp stab with those very weak hands. I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah,
okay.
so this king queen, I mean, so I min raised for value. I was planning on calling a shove, but he just min three bet. So I feel like I can play this more profitably post flop and call by calling
Yeah,
rather than just putting in the
definitely.
fourth bet pre flop. So on this
Yeah,
board,
definitely.
just gonna value bet and stack off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can treat it as you know, feels like it has to be the nuts against this type of player, and if he's got ace king, it's who cares?
And bet calling turn again small, just to induce.
Yeah.
And I feel like river is still a value shove, although it's a little
Yeah, it
bit
really feels
closer,
like he's got.
like a
Yeah, I
10 or
really feels like
queens
he's
or
got a
jacks
10,
or
yeah, ace 10 or jacks. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Don't think he's ever folding. Don't think we're ever behind here.
yeah.
Um,
Nice.
yeah,
Win number
yeah.
one. That's good. All right, so
Good,
cool.
good.
Wasn't wasn't too many adjustments, but hopefully in the next game we'll be able to see something else. Give Jen Khan the old face emote. All right. Wow, a 42. That's pretty good.
Hey, that's what you need.
All right.
Wow, okay. So pretty light call there with king queen suited. I think yeah, it's not
Mm.
a call I'd be in a hurry to make first hand.
All right. So, um, yeah, I think like either of these two options are both good. So I feel like this
Yep.
hand doesn't play as good, seeing flops. So I'm just gonna min raise, um, as opposed to limping.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you can win it without seeing a flop with a hand that you don't want to play post flop, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm. So he's 3xing, so I can instantly give him the old green player mark.
Yep, perfect.
But this hand, I feel like flops a bit better, so maybe I can limp this
Yep,
one.
yep,
Cool. So I think my problem, I mean, I like heads up coaching a lot because I think that's one of the weakest points of my game. So getting 2 to 1 in position, like I can't really fold anything that I limp against a green player, so I would call here. Would you agree?
Um, I would, but on the other hand, I do think that if we think about this hand that we could have min raised it
Mm.
and played a pot with initiative, with a fairly decent hand. I kind of don't like getting in the habit of limp calling too much. Um, it's if they min ISO, then I think it's fine. Um, and I think we definitely can, play these pots and try and steal them post flop. But I think they get, recreational players get really stubborn, like with ace high here. Like he probably doesn't, check fold it at any
Yeah.
point, especially on this turn card. So I think sometimes it's just easier to play a limping game. And then with the first hand, that first limp is all about seeing, okay, how is he going to react to this? Is he going to see weakness and raise me, or is he going to just, fear a trap and check? And once he's raised you, you can sort of say, all right, he either had a hand that time or he's planning to raise me every time I show weakness. And so the next time you limp, you probably want a hand that you're much more comfortable calling against the raise. Yeah, I mean, like this one is kind of fine, isn't it? Because we don't really care whether or not we get raised off our limp. The 10-7 feels like more of a shame in a way.
Yeah. So I guess like the first hand, you're testing him out, and if he does raise, we'll just fold more often than we would, and then adjust accordingly.
Yeah, so I think there's something to be said for like limping with a pretty weak hand for your first limp because you're not going to be wasting like let's say you take your first hand and you have 9-10 suited and you limp and the guy instantly shoves over you, then you kind of wish you'd taken a different line, like just raising and then you can fold and but he's less likely to just take that line against you when you raise.
Yeah. Alright, cool. There's a few different lines. Like I floated the 10-7 because it was a min donk, um,
Yeah,
and I had like two overs to the middle cards, so I feel like that's fairly standard. And the turn he checked, so I just stabbed, and he took it away. The other hand was the Queen 2, where I just folded flop with one over and the gut shot to the pot size bet because I'm short. Um,
yeah,
would you agree with that, or would
yeah.
you like,
I think
yeah?
that's fine. Once they don't pot, I think it's really hard to continue without more equity there.
So like, can I call with less than 10 big blinds with the suited Jack 5 and
You
defend?
can if you plan to flop like this on a regular basis.
But do you think
I
it's
think
profitable, like,
that's kind of close.
yeah,
It's close. It's close. I mean, that's easy. Yeah. It's close because I think recreational players probably raise a bit tighter than um, regs, and therefore they will have a stronger range, and they'll probably be less willing to let go of those hands post flop. So you sort of, yeah. I mean,
so yeah, we just limped. Oh, sorry, we min raised the Jack 5, and we're seeing some donks.
yeah,
Not folding a pair, and especially not the turn
yep,
getting 6-1. So we just call, and probably call unless he bets really big. I'll give him credit for
yeah,
a flush. But yeah, getting 7-1, we just call.
yep. Looks good. Okay.
Uh,
Huh. Yeah.
Running okay though.
Yeah. Yeah, you see some of these strange, you know, plays by recreational players where they make a play that really looks like they wanted you to fold and then they show up with jacks.
I know. You'd think he wanted min raise there, but he decided to just shove. Yep, so
Yeah.
we're facing a lot of donks against this guy.
Yep.
But yeah, with just 9 high, no draw, no backdoors, we're just going to fold that, obviously. But I don't mind if he keeps using that strategy. So, I mean, I could put in a small 3-bet, but I feel like this hand doesn't flop very well, so if he does call, um, I don't know, I'm just not that happy with it, so I guess I just shove, because I still think he's going to
Yeah.
call wide enough
I think so. I
to
think
get more
so. Yeah.
value from shoving.
Yeah.
So, I feel like he's been very passive against my raises, but still, like, limping this hand feels pretty good. Um,
Yeah.
so
I think
what's your
like if
like
you
general opinion
yeah.
on limping versus raising? Like, when would you do one thing over the other?
I would like you said, okay, my default strategy is raising any two cards, and I would say against someone who it's clear at the point when you enter heads up that they are recreational, I would take that strategy and use it because um, you're just going to get a lot of folds every time they don't hit, and that's going to make up. And so you're getting them to put in money pre-flop and then take it away post-flop on a pretty regular basis. Whereas when you limp, you don't build a pot, and then you give them the opportunity of doing what this guy's doing, which is just donking into you. Now, of course, he can still donk into you when you've raised, but somehow it's easier for you to represent the big hands if you've raised. So you'll get guys donking, bottom pair and then just folding to a raise because they're sort of donking for information. So like here, we just value, just
Value raise, yeah.
kind of clear. Yeah.
Um, my sizings might be a little off, but yeah, I don't think it makes a big difference. So we are
Mm.
seeing
And I mean,
the
yeah,
3x's. Would you ever call here anything, or are you just going to
I
shove
would.
if you want?
No, I would call this hand because I think like
Okay,
he's probably bad enough post flop to justify it, and we can afford the chips. So, I mean, we
okay.
can play fairly fit or fold and expect him to just not get away when he have. Let's say if he has, pocket eights, I just don't see him ever getting away from that hand. Whatever, um,
Mhm.
whatever the board comes, he's kind of committing to it.
All right, cool. Sorry guys in the chat. The action's going quite quickly, so I am going to be missing out on some questions. But if there's anything you want me to ask Tim specifically, definitely put at @PulseAU and it'll show up in red, and um, I'll make sure to ask Tim. So we win a flip. Was that a flip? Yes,
It was
nice.
a flip, yep.
Awesome. Wow, that was a big score. That was
That's
a
nice. That was six
$42
X,
prize
wasn't it?
pool. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Those are the
Was
ones you
that
need
2
to.
out of 2?
Yeah, that's it. Flipping well in the big ones is important. It's an important skill to work on.
Your email. From what I remember from watching Primo, he plays a more waiting game, limping a lot, checking flop or turn. You seem a lot more aggressive. Maybe a question for Tim. From his experience, what's the better strategy? Perhaps a few words on the general approach to spins. So, yeah, I guess Tim,
Y-
that question is, passive versus aggressive, which is the better
I
approach.
mean, I think yeah, it's not for me to kind of question Primo's game because he has, been playing heads up, sit and goes for donkey's years and clearly knows a lot more about them than I do. I mean, I've found playing six max that the aggressive game is the game that you learn to play. So it's very difficult to actually change your strategy in a fundamental way. So, I can't necessarily say, that the aggressive strategy is better. It's just that it fits in with, let's say, my style of play, because you're always trying to represent a certain hand. Whereas, I think if you're very, very good at hand reading and very good at just sort of reading weakness in your opponents and taking pots away from them, just playing a lot more pots will work in your favor, and therefore that makes the limping strategy more successful. So, I think it's partly a matter of taste and of style rather than saying, one thing is better than another. Certainly, I mean, if you try and limp a lot of hands, you have to be very good at balancing your ranges because, as we've seen, the typical response when you limp is to just sort of, get shoved on a ton. So you don't want to be limping lots of hands, which had you raised, your raise would have got more respect from, recreational players, and then you at least would have got to see the flop.
Yeah, and I guess it also depends on the stake. Like you're more likely to play exploitative in low stakes because players are generally exploitative, and in high stakes you're going to play more GTO strategies.
Mm. Right, right.
Um,
I mean, and even at the high stakes, you definitely can, with the right software, you can get games against fairly weak opposition. So I tend to favor a more exploitative approach, and I feel like if you're having to play really GTO, then as a general rule, you're in the wrong game. If you see what I mean, like, obviously you can play the toughest games on the internet and play in a sort of perfect manner and make money if you're really good, but it's kind of a lot easier to play softer games and exploit people's mistakes.
So this hand's kind of close in my opinion, but
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting hand. Yeah.
so
What was the edge?
it was limped pre-flop, and
Yeah,
wait, I'll get the hand history. I'll just play my ace queen first. We'll come back to it.
yeah. Okay, it's a decent flop.
Yeah, it's not bad. Wrong color though, but
Yeah.
hmm. I mean, I think I just shove because it looks weaker than making it 200.
Hmm.
Okay, hopefully I
Okay.
can fold my button, then we can talk about that 7-9. Yes. Alright, so yeah, it was limped pre-flop, and
Okay.
then I flop second pair, the small blind leads for half pot, I just
Yeah.
call, and the
Yeah.
button calls back, and it goes check, check, bet. So I feel like
Yeah.
I just, on this board, it's so dry that there's no draws he can have. Like, either
Yeah.
he's floating three-way with a pure bluff, like an ace 10 high, that he's, for some reason, turning into a bluff on the turn, or he just has me beat.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 I think your call sort of protects you a bit there from being bluffed because he could bluff one player, but it's a rare opponent. He's just gonna, like you say, float two opponents with nothing and then bluff into two people. So I think your fold looks pretty solid on the turn.
Yeah. Would you ever limp here? I feel like this is a decent situation to limp, but I'm gonna raise, but maybe you can talk about limping the
Yeah.
button with like 15, 20 big blinds effective.
Well, that's like uh, the person in the comments was getting at earlier, I think, is that that there are players there that would advocate limping some of those sorts of hands in that situation. I don't do it myself, um, or at least I've done it with one or two hands occasionally when I feel like I'm facing very aggressive um, opponents and I'm likely to get three bet shoved on, but I I really want to play the hand. But with a hand like Queen Nine, I would just tend to raise it for value against weaker players and just expect them to make enough mistakes.
So this hand, I went for the
Okay.
limp, but this is like near the top of my limping range. He wasn't
Hmm.
really being that aggressive, but decided to make it 3x, but I'm getting 2 to 1. I figured this
Yeah.
hand flops well enough that I can just limp call. Um,
Yeah.
and then obviously when we flop this well, we're just gonna check, get it in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
Especially against the pot size bet, which is always, pretty weak, isn't it?
I think yeah, it depends on the
I guess he's
opponent,
not
but
folding, but we always have good equity here. Yeah.
yeah, we're 55% even against
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
ace high, so can't ever fold flush draws in hyper turbo formats.
No.
So like again, I think default either of these two buttons will be profitable. So I don't know. I guess I'll just limp to start. But I don't feel like without any metagame or any reads that you can justify like raising more than limping because it really just depends on the opponent which one is going to be better, and you just don't know what
Yeah.
he's going to be on the first hand. We're running pretty good.
We are. Yeah. We are. Yeah. So I mean, that 10-8 suited hand is like a really good example of um what happens when you limp because you're trying to weigh up like what's better there to raise that hand and
Fold
get
to a shove.
either free bet and shoved on by ace queen and then fold pre, or to limp it, call, and then flip post flop. So I mean, I think there's an argument that says you're better off raise folding that hand because then you're kind of in more control of the situation rather than when you limp call it you're kind of always on the back foot even if you are able to choose those flops where you go to war with so against a typical opponent that's why I'd favor raising and I'd tend to limp the sort of real bottom of my range against recreational players, where I don't care if they raise my limps and I have no intention of limp calling. So let's say um, you know, you're blind versus blind, second hand, unknown player, and you've got, 3-6 offsuit. That's a hand I don't mind limp stabbing because I don't. If he raises my limp, I don't mind folding it. And I,
Yeah.
but and I get the information about, is this the type of player who's going to raise my limps because he sees weakness, or is he just going to, you know, sit in his box and wait for a hand, or wait to flop big, and then, so his first reaction can give you a lot of information, and you've not wasted a hand, like, okay, let's say a really nice hand that you wanted to play, and then they just shove on you. Because I mean, it's kind of good if he 3x's you, because at least you get to see the flop. But if they shove on you with ace queen, you never get to see the flop. So,
Mm.
it's. I think there are arguments for both ways.
And also because I guess recreational players usually facing a raise, they're going to be more passive compared to
Yeah, exactly.
pros. So
Yeah.
they're just going to call and you see a flop anyway, but you do
Mhm.
get that extra fold equity. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So nothing really notable that we missed during that discussion. Just a few
Weak
raise
hands.
folds
Yeah.
and standard. I think the limp with the 8-3 off was the best play with the bottom of my range and just stabbing it away.
Okay, that's an unusual call, but a good one.
Hmm.
Yeah, a good call, but I don't see that very often. So I would kind of hazard a guess that this guy is pretty decent. I don't know. I was when I suspect that they're good, I always just, right click and see, is he playing any other tables? Is he playing one table? Is he playing a bunch of tables?
Yeah, this guy's just one tabling.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that call forced me to fold this 4-2, where if I still knew that he was um, a recreational player, I would maybe just limp that hand. So with the aces, I think I can limp, but we don't have any limp dynamic really, because he hasn't been very aggressive against my limps, so I'm just going
Hmm.
to min raise this.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think on this board, my standard size would be half pot rather than less than half, because it's a little bit drawy.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think you could argue that that's a board which is slightly better for your range than his, in the sense that you have most of the ace X in your range, and therefore you're the one with the straight draw as well as potentially the overcard. So I might bet a little bit less on there because we'd love to get him to make a move on that board.
Yep.
Um, so there's a flush draw, but there's not much else that we're frightened of there. So
Okay,
I might try a little bit smaller there.
that makes sense. I'm just acting slowly so that we can get the discussion through,
Yeah,
without
yeah.
getting like three hands. So I've folded a lot, so I really feel like I can't fold three times in a row on the button. So even
Hmm.
though this
Hmm.
is in a vacuum, I think a just a fold against this guy because he's playing okay. Because
Hmm.
I folded my last two buttons, I'm not gonna fold this one. And
Hmm.
we face the old donk.
Yeah.
But with just nine high, like I'm not going to mess around. We'll just give him credit this one
Yeah,
time.
that's fine. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, we'll try again because it seems to be working.
Hmm.
This board is very good for our range.
Hmm.
Like I feel like he's full of shit, but I just can't play back with nine high because maybe he just bet calls here with a flush draw or an eight, and I'm still fucked. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
never fold anything on that board, like any draw, any pair, but with just the old 9-5 off. Like I'm not gonna shove, but I mean I would be interesting to hear how wide you would shove in in that spot when he's clearly limping wide-ish. Would you think
Hmm.
about shoving 7-9 off?
Well, what I tend to do in that kind of situation is not shove that wide, especially with this kind of hand, which I don't mind seeing a free flop. Like I tend to think, okay, if you had raised or shoved, I would have folded fairly happily, not really with too much thought. So if you're giving me the chance to see a free flop, I'll take it. If I've got a hand that I would have called a shove with, I'll almost always shove on them. And then some of the time, if it's clear that they're just limping a weak range, then I think it's different. But if you're not sure whether they're limp trapping or um, you know, limping weak hands, what you can do is just make a fairly hefty raise, and very often they'll just fold. So I'm, for some of the time, I'm just doing that with fairly weak hands, just to try and, represent a much stronger hand than you represent when you shove, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Because I think
Yep.
actually that sometimes generates more fold equity than if you're
Yep.
shoving.
The old non all in all in.
Yeah.
So I feel like this one's just plus EV push. I don't really have another option with less than eight
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
blinds against a
Yeah.
guy that's
Yeah.
been playing fairly like straightforward. Not, I mean that Queen 8 suited was a good call, but it wasn't crazy. But like
No.
this hand would be plus EV against everyone. It's within Nash as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I would like to know your opinion on what you do with 8 to 10 and 8 to like 12 big blinds heads up on the button. Are you just like against decent players, are you also limping some hands with, let's say, 8 big blinds? Because I know that that's a thing now in heads up hypers, having a limp
Hmm.
range with those, with that kind of stack size.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of work on that. Again, like I was saying earlier, it's not something that comes that naturally to me. But once you see enough people doing something, you start to think, hang on, there must be something I'm missing here. And I think, players are understanding that with a lot of hands in their range, they're better off limping them than folding them. But they can only limp them if they limp some strong hands as well, so that their limps don't get automatically shoved on. So what you see people doing is, limping with pocket eights, say, for 8 to 12 big blinds, and then snapping you off when you shove 7-9, and then you feel like really foolish.
Yeah,
But then at the same time, they're going to take a hand which they can't shove, like I don't know, 7-3 offsuit, and limp that with the intention of limp stabbing and just playing using their position. And I think it does work very well if you aren't able to counter it. And I think it's something that you have to kind of work on it because it's not an intuitive strategy like we've seen. But I think I can see the merits of it. It's just that, like I said, for me, it takes a bit more adjustment from what I've been doing for years and years. That's one of the hard things in any kind of new format of poker is you have to sort of unlearn some of the lessons that you've you know learnt already, or be willing to try new things.
yeah, yeah. Alright, so you've got a green player again, and
Yep.
this I am the best from the Ukraine. Yeah, because I know, I mean, I've watched a lot of Primo's stream, and he really loves that, balanced limp range from
Hmm.
8 big blinds, and then he just plays Nash for less than 8.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, sometimes he just shoves all in for 10 with some of his range as well, but he definitely likes mixing up.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that, so I've been trying to, improve my heads up by using that.
I mean, I think the other thing to say about that is if you take Primo as an example, he's been playing probably the toughest heads up sit and goes out there for a number of years. So he's been forced to come up with a very balanced strategy that works against really good thinking players. And whether that's optimal against all of the opposition in spin and goes, I'm less sure. You know, you might. Wow, this is yeah.
I mean,
I
this
mean, what
feels
do you
like
do?
a call, but I mean, I think,
I think I'd fold. I think I'd fold only because it's clear that this guy's terrible. So yeah, we might be flipping with pocket fives here, and he might occasionally show up with king jack and ace four off. I feel like we have so much value just staying in the game and
Yeah,
waiting for him to, do the same thing when we've got pocket eights, whatever. So
I would agree with
yeah,
that. So like the
I
future
tend to
value
fold that.
of, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. So I'm using what we discussed earlier with the 10-8, like
yeah.
um, just going with a raise because it's early on in the game. We want to test him out, and he is complying with what we said earlier. He's just calling. We're seeing a flop anyway.
Yeah.
So betting with the gut shot. I think it's
Well, we've got an
fairly
open ender.
unlikely that he has an ace. So
Yeah.
I feel
We've
like I
got
have to
open
just.
ender plus flush draw. So
Sorry, yeah, the open ender. Yeah, that was
yeah.
just my misspeak. So I feel like I have to bet call turn because we have so many outs. Um, I know he snapped again. I just feel
Yeah.
like bluffing unknown players and $7 spins is a bad idea, so I'm just going to give up after missing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he will show up with an ace here quite often, just from the speed that he called. And I think that's another thing you see is that recreational players won't necessarily just three bet shove with that kind of hand. So, if you limp there, he probably raises you, maybe shoves or raises, and you don't get to see the flop. Whereas there, you actually get, really quite a good situation because you're drawing to the nuts, and you can see that when you make your draw there, that guy's never getting away from his ace.
Mm.
Like a better player would be able to say, "Look, I just don't beat anything. I need to fold." Whereas I think, he snap called. His hand to him was the nuts there. So he's just going to go with it all the way. So you kind of playing the pot in ideal conditions for you.
Yeah. So I'm going limp stab with the bottom of my range here,
Yep.
because I don't think he's going to be that aggressive because he just calls pre-flop with the ace two, blind versus blind, and seems to work.
I'm just waiting for catch up actually on it's still showing that ace deuce hand, so you'll have to give me a mo for it to
Okay. Is it frozen?
catch
Because I
up.
might need to start.
It hasn't completely frozen because I can see stuff going on in the stream box on the top left. Um,
Okay.
but that looks delayed. Yeah, it kind of looks like it's frozen actually. Yeah, and my picture's frozen, so all right.
Okay.
Shall
Just
I
hang on
just
a sec.
close Team Viewer and we'll launch it again?
Yeah, try that again.
Okay. All right. Let's try that again. So okay, so I've got 7-4 offsuit now, yeah?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep. Okay, super. Sorry about that.
I feel like I'm just gonna fold this 7-4 because now he has a decent chip lead.
Hmm.
I just feel like he's gonna put more pressure on me in that situation than he was earlier when we were just all even
Hmm.
stacks.
Hmm.
And because I limped last time, he's gonna see, well, this guy's limping again. I'm gonna play aggressively.
Yep.
Even though, like, in a vacuum, again, that can be a profitable limp stab with any two cards. I think game flow reasons made me fold that one. And the five's just shoving all in because it plays terribly as a raise call.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think once your stack's fallen to sort of somewhere around 15, 16, 17 big blinds, those small pairs work way better as shoves than as, min raises.
Hmm. And this similar theory, I mean, I'm just gonna fold here, but similar reasons
Yep.
to early to before.
Yep.
Now that he has chips, he's more likely to just raise pre-flop and put chips in, and
Yep.
yeah, gonna play a bit tighter. Yurima, how often do you flat a min raise in the big blind? Odds are obviously good, but the bad hands, you just tend to lose valuable chips. On the other hand, blinds are very high and one just can't wait and fold. So, Tim, maybe you can talk about your standard defense range against a min raise in the big blind
Okay.
from
So
from from the button,
is
we'll say.
from the
'Cause,
button, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well, it's another thing that I'm having to work on because people are telling me that, yeah, so for example, here we must play the hand.
Mm,
We can choose between limping or raising. What we can't do is fold.
yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't shove against this guy because, he played in a fairly straightforward manner with the ace deuce, so
Mm,
I don't like sort of fear him.
yeah. So a lot more pot control against bad players. just trying to
Yeah,
win small pots.
yeah. And if it looks like they're sort of playing honestly, like with his ace deuce, he didn't do anything funky, he just sort of called. You kind of get the feeling like if he doesn't have anything, he probably just folds. So I would raise here for sure.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
because the big
Yeah.
blind was short, I mean, I'd have to raise call, and I wasn't too happy about it, but I guess you feel because the hand's just good enough as a value.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't even hate raise folding there. I just feel like we have to raise because it's pretty strong hand, plays well in position, and we know the big blind's bad.
Hmm.
And if we think that he's being honest there in his three bet, range, we can make a tight fold and potential in theory be exploited, but in reality, you know, just be keeping all of our options open. Um, so
So back
I
to talking
guess
about the
I guess
defense range.
yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think I defend too tight. I mean, and I think, that's what people, have sort of suggested. Okay, you're defending too tight. I tend to defend hands that play well. I've seen people defending hands like Queen 5 offsuit out of position against me. Which it's like a real slap in the face. It's like, okay, you have that little respect for my game that Queen 5 is the nuts against me. But I wouldn't defend those kinds of hands because I feel like, as your commenter was saying, they just don't play very well at all. And you just get in a ton of trouble. But I think anything half decent, like you know, nine has like 9-10 off Jack 9. I think if you have any reason to believe that your opponent on the button is not a strong player, then those become hands that you really need to strongly consider defending at least some of the time. You don't. Let's say you don't have to have a range of hands that you're always going to defend. So, for example, let's suppose if the button is seems to be competent, but the small blind is terrible, I think you're allowed to fold more hands against the button's raise because you're trying to focus your play on playing in position against the small blind. Whereas if, let's say, they both seem quite decent, then you're just going to have to defend, um, you know, a decent amount of hands. I mean, I can give you sort of a suggested range, but in a way, it's so player dependent that I think it's sort of open to abuse, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So this hand, I went for the raise, and I was just check
Yep.
folding on this flop, and
Yep.
stabbed the turn because he checked back. I was just trying to get queen high or king high to fold, and obviously hitting a pair on the river, I'm just going to value bet.
Yep. Looks good.
So he probably has a six here. Yep, there's a six.
A6. Yep.
Ah, cool. These spins though, another huge spin, $42 prize pool.
Yeah. So, for
Hmm.
example, this hand here, yeah, I mean, it's easy when he's short, isn't it?
Yeah,
I hadn't realized. Yeah, I think it's fine. It's
but for
not much
20
else we
big
can do.
blinds, you can just defend there passively and just call.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think like if it's hand one and you've got ace six there and you just rip it into an unknown player,
Yeah,
you're
I agree. I don't
probably
like that.
making a mistake. It just seems really unnecessary to me. Like not necessarily bad in terms of losing, going to be losing chips. It's just like really unnecessary when you can take a different line and wait for. I hate saying it, wait for a different spot, wait for a better spot, but probably you will have a better spot than that against a bad player at some point.
Hmm. Yep. I agree. But a hand like ace 8 for 15 big blinds is just too much value.
Yeah, I agree, and it just doesn't play. It doesn't play well, and there's not much. You have less leverage with it post flop.
Well, we raised pre. This guy's donking. He's so full of shit. He has absolutely
Yeah,
nothing. So,
definitely.
is this a spot where you would raise or would you
I
float?
would
Because
raise. Yeah,
you
I
would
would
raise.
raise.
All right, good. And do you like
Yeah,
this sizing? Because I think this sizing is pretty
perfect,
good. Nice. All right,
perfect.
good.
Yeah. What I find is when you call, they just donk again on the turn,
Mm.
and then if you haven't improved, then you're like, do I raise now? But it's much bigger. It's a much bigger portion of your stack
Yeah, and they're
because
more
you already
likely to
had bets on
call
two
weak
streets.
hands because they're committed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go ahead and raise right there on the flop, if they've got the top pair, then yeah, they're definitely not going anywhere. But if they've got anything else, it's kind of gross. And the good thing with that hand that you had there, the Jack 7,
Mm.
is if he hasn't got what he's repping, which is a king, then any Jack and any 7 is, more or less the nuts. And you've got the flush draw, so if you turn a flush, if he does call and you turn a flush card, then at that point you know that he's probably donking with, either 4-5 or a king, and
Mm.
then you've got a really good chance of getting paid, on if you make your flush on the river. So I think that's a really nice line to take against fish, especially on that kind of board there where if he's either got a king or he's got a weak hand. There's no hand on that board that he's going to have other than a king where he's going to be really happy about calling a raise.
Yeah, that's right. Because the board is so dry, and yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's definitely something that I need to improve on is because I tend to float there way more than than I raise, and I do like the raise there for sure. So I went for
mm.
the old limp, and it didn't work. So I feel
Yeah,
like because he's short, I'm just gonna fold.
yeah,
It's the first time he's raised, even though we're getting 2-1 in position. Again, it's the bottom of my range, so I don't mind just folding to the raise there.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So against the min raise, I mean, I can't fold much. So even though this hand might be quite marginal, I think that defending getting 3-1 against a tablet player in a $7
Yeah.
game, yeah, let's go, bro. But yeah, this board, yeah, we're just gonna check fold, especially against full pot.
Yep.
Oops, that's a timing tell, but guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Come on, 7x, come on. Wow, guys,
Yay.
we're running pretty damn good at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
That's pretty nuts. We've won two 7x's. Uh,
Closing in on that 1K.
yeah, we're certainly profiting. Oops, I forgot to re-register for another one, so I'll do it in my... Oh, never mind. Whoops, I accidentally regged for two, but that's alright.
Okay.
I'll just stick one off the screen. I'll pick the biggest. Don't worry about this left game, Tim. You can see it. We'll
Okay.
just
All right.
pretend that doesn't exist. Just focus on
Okay.
this.
Yeah.
Um, so second pair in a limped pot. I feel like just betting out for some thin
Hmm.
value against 6x, 9, worst 9x and draws is better than check calling it.
Yeah.
Hmm. I feel like I'm still going to bet fold.
Yeah, that looks good. I mean, yeah, I think your other option there is to check and bluff catch there. Like I sometimes think in that situation that if they have the draw, like the 10 jack, they have to bet it on the turn. Whereas if they have 9x or queen x, they're like not that happy about the 6 pairing, so they're more likely to check back. So like, if people are really sort of unbalanced in their betting ranges there, you can actually be fairly comfortable in check calling on that kind of pairing turn card. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not folding here.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that flop.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think this is such a good value hand. We don't even have to just shove. We can just induce with a smallish raise, even though it's fairly obvious we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
folding. I get doesn't
Yeah.
really matter what you do there as long as you don't check call.
I actually don't mind check calling here, because I think he can very often, um, if you think about his whole range and that Queen and the Jack are very lightly outs, when you check raise there and get it in, you're not doing that brilliantly against his range. I mean, you're obviously doing fine against it, but you're not doing that well against it. Yeah, I'd fold here
Wow, really?
just because,
With
yeah, just because
fours?
he's never folding once he makes it. Oh, hang on, what's happening? Yeah. So, um, I
I mean,
misread that the big blind was all in, but the thing is, he's obviously committing himself pre. So I would say again that we don't need to flip there against the range that he's representing. So
right.
sorry,
Well,
yeah, I'm
yeah. I think that because the big blind was all in, that's why I did it. Because we
Mhm.
basically heads up, and yeah, like
Yeah.
because the big blind's all in.
Uh, yeah. I don't know. It's always tough, but I always feel like these recreational players just give off massive tells about the sort of strength of their hand, and like I think that he never has a really strong hand there when he does that because it's kind of clear that he wants you to fold, but at the same time he's never folding himself, so then we're kind of voluntarily flipping for quite a decent chunk of chips.
Mm,
um, he will show up with like deuces and threes, and then it's all good. But
yeah.
I feel like we're not forced to take that flip
But
since we've only got 10 chips in the middle. I would tend to fold there actually,
yeah. But don't you feel that
but I
like
do
if
see
you have some morsel of fold equity, then this is insanely good shove because he's putting in a quarter of his stack and then just folding.
definitely. But I would just assume that no one would put in that much and fold. I'm not saying I've never seen it. I'm just saying that I would assume that he's not folding. So I tend to
Mm,
kind of just say, all right, if you want to make it clear that you're not folding and I get away from my hand, that's fine. That's how I tend to view it. What was the
all
other
right.
hand we were talking about before the fours? Can't remember now. Oh, the Queen
Queen
Jack.
Jack.
Yeah. Well, I was just sort of thinking that, like, if you think about this particular turn card, okay, I'll try and rephrase it, and I'm not explaining myself very well, but basically, if you check raise and he shoves, then you're okay with calling it off, but you're not ever getting your money in ahead. Whereas if he's a bad player and you make your hand, whether that's, a jack, a queen, or the straight, that's when he can make a really big mistake because he can then get his money in drawing dead. Whereas,
Mm,
when you're here, you're always drawing. So I think I always used to play it aggressively, just like this thing. You can't check all these kinds of hands out of position. But I think more and more I'm finding that you, you can. Well, he's betting. If he pots it here, then I think it's totally fine. We just check shove because I assume he has a weaker hand. Whereas I tend to think again that this size bet is a bet that it kind of wants you to call. If that makes sense, it's actually stronger than if he pots it here. So I'd rather call and just try and play the hand as profitably as possible. So, well, I suppose what I'm saying is I think check raising's fine here, but I think it might be just as profitable, if not more so, to call here
mm-hmm.
and let him make his mistake on later streets.
All right, cool. Thank you, VB Pothead, for the sub. Welcome to the team, man. Thanks for the support. Enjoy the emotes. So I do have a heads-up match going on the side
Hmm.
here. That,
Yeah,
um,
let's make that bigger.
yeah, the one that I registered accidentally. So
Yeah, I really like your ISO here. Yeah.
good. We've only been playing heads up for a few hands. It hasn't been too crazy. Just a few min raises and folds and some standard C bets. So we don't really have a good dynamic.
Yeah.
So we can just pretend like we don't have any reads on this guy and play as is. It's another 2x. Hmm. I mean, I ISO'd last time, so I mean, I don't really love ISOing this, even though it doesn't really
Hmm.
play very well. I
Hmm.
feel like I just check.
Yeah. Seems okay to me.
I would like to stab low boards, but 10-9, even with the backdoor king high flush, I feel like this just smashes his limping range. So, like,
Hmm.
for me, this is just check fold. But, like, any low board, I would just donk. I think without reads, people tend to play fairly fit or fold.
Yeah, I mean that's close that hand there. I definitely know there's some people who would say, you can't fold king high and backdoor flush draw. I always used to fold in this spot without much thought. these days I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe we can call their one street against this whole limping range. Maybe we can float
Mm-hmm.
that one street. I think it's pretty close. It's not a spot that we like, but at the same time, our hand is somewhat under-repped. And we are going to have the best hand there a reasonable amount of time. We can continue on, um, you know, I guess we can continue on a reasonable number of turns. So it's kind of closer than it looks, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. That makes sense. And because it's only half pot, we're getting good odds anyway.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So
Okay.
I was using the limp stab with the bottom of my range again, which I think is fine against him.
Yep.
So like, if I was playing against a regular limping, this is not a good stack size for it, but obviously you can include this in your balanced limp
hmm
range.
hmm
But yeah, because when you start getting up to that 12, 15 big blind range, just min raising any two is super exploitable because they can start
Yeah.
rejamming on you super light.
Yeah. And I love it when they do it this size because it's like he never has a really great hand, but he's always committed. So
Hmm.
you're just, getting your money in super good.
Awesome, we are running hot.
All right. Doing good. Yeah.
Well, we don't have much time left, so is there anything, Tim, that you think we need to cover that we haven't talked about yet? I mean, I guess most people watching this
Need
stream are
to
probably
cover.
playing fairly low stakes, so maybe
Yeah.
tailoring, lines towards low stakes. What is wrong with my...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we've like today we've been sort of mostly trying to find something close to an optimal strategy for these games. Um, and I think you can tell that most of the players are fairly um, I don't want to say bad, I'd just say unsophisticated in the way they play. So you don't need to be super balanced. You should be really looking for the lines that work best against these types of players. Um, you see so many people just potting it on the flop, like we just saw in that hand just now,
Hmm.
which is sort of it's such a huge error on so many levels that you basically want to get these guys post flop as often as you reasonably can. Um,
God, I'm getting really good odds, but this hand plays, I think, pretty bad. He hasn't really 3-bet at all.
yeah, yeah,
So it's just the sizing a little too big and the hand's a little too
yeah.
weak.
I mean, I tend to treat those three bets with quite a lot of respect, because I feel like recreational players don't use three bets in the way that regs do, and that it's much more of a strong range that they do. You get the occasional guy that's messing around with, 6-3 suited or something, but mostly it's a hand that they believe is a strong hand, and so if you once you get onto that level where you think, okay, they think their hand is good, then that takes away most of your sort of post-flop fold equity because they've already kind of mentally committed themselves to the hand, whether they hit anything or not.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, just nice try board.
Yeah, I mean, I think a smaller size is very good on this board too.
Yeah, yeah, super. Yeah.
So three-handed on the button against two unknowns. You don't have to be super specific, but are you okay with raising like any king in that spot?
So that's probably not in my default range, but as soon as I see the big blind's got a tablet, I think your range ought to widen. Now, I I wouldn't necessarily, I'd rather widen it to maybe, let's say if you normally raise 9, 10 offsuit, yeah, I
Mm.
definitely include 8, 9, maybe even 7, 8 offsuit. Whether you're, I'd widen that before I widen, the kings, let's say all the way down to king deuce. But I definitely think king six is close enough to a default range that you can justify opening it.
Yep.
So did we limp stab here with the
Yeah, I
five
limped
four?
this one. I
Yeah,
haven't limped in
yeah,
the small blind yet.
yeah. It's
I
good.
think if it was the first hand, I would just raise that. But
hmm
because I don't know, I guess we've raised a few times, I feel like he might start playing back.
hmm
I feel like this is what I really, really want to do. But still, these guys I think are too passive for me to just
Yeah,
play a passive line. Like this should be instantly profitable against them.
yeah,
But
I
certainly
agree.
against
Totally.
aggressive players, I think limp there is 100% the best play. Uh, Not the best board. I think I can actually check back here. So I'm going to do it, but what do you feel about c-betting this kind of board with this weak-ish showdown value hand? Like, we are going to win at river sometimes.
Um, I tend not to check back with hands that I'm not comfortable calling a turn bet. So let's say here, this kind of scenario, I
Mm,
look at the board and I say it is good for his range, yeah, and he is going to check raise me all in, and that check raising range will include some 10 jack, which I'm technically, that I'm ahead of, some 9x, some queen x, etc. But since I don't really want to call a turn bet from this guy, especially when I don't know what size he's going to use, I'd rather just bet my draw to the nuts, and then if I get check raised, deal with it then. Um, that's kind of how I approach it. I think if you had, let's say, what would make a difference? I mean, I would definitely be happy checking back, let's say, 8, 9 here. I would be much happy with that because then we can say, okay, I will call every turn bet
easily to
and then
call for
evaluate the
like
river. Yeah,
90. So I was planning on calling turn, but because he bet two-thirds, I ended up folding,
yeah.
just because of sizing reasons. So, yeah,
Well,
I
I think
guess
that's the thing, and I think like we were talking about earlier, um, the sort of level one approach is if you if you limp pre-flop, you're weak. If you check back on the flop, you're weak. And therefore, these players are quite likely to just bet with a really wide range. And therefore, unless you're kind of comfortable calling, you almost don't want to give them the incentive to attack that weakness when you actually have a hand that you kind of want to get to showdown or at least want to at least see the river. So that's why I'd be tempted to just bet the flop there and if he check raises then we deal with it.
yep, okay, makes sense.
The other good thing is that, say, if we bet the flop there and he just flats, then we have a much better like read on what kind of hand he has, and then let's say we bet, he calls, turn goes check check, we river a 10, and he checks once again. Then we say, okay, you have a 5 or you have a 9. Now I have a clear value bet because we've actually got the information from, yeah, okay, so well,
In
interesting
this
spot.
hand,
I guess it's just
I don't think I can value raise this.
no, I don't think so.
So we just call. Ugh.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So this will be the last game, guys, for
Yeah.
the session. So hopefully we can finish off on a high note. It's already been a very good session, winning a lot. So definitely shoving all in with the king. I was calling it all in, so just treat
Yeah.
this as
Exactly.
extra
Exactly.
money.
Yep.
Ugh. Like, I'm very tempted to just shove any two cards, especially because it's cheap EV, so I'm going to do it.
Hmm.
But obviously against some players that would be really bad, but I feel like against this guy, should be good enough to shove any two with cheap EV as a short stack. Do you agree?
Um, I don't know about that. I mean, I definitely think. You see, it's funny. You see their reaction. Um, yeah. Okay. I mean, he's probably on tilt. This is a spot where I might limp the 8-7 actually, because I feel like this guy will be on tilt and he's going to jam into you. Um,
Yeah,
so
and are you going to limp fold though?
that's
You
where
can't limp fold for four big
well,
blinds.
that's true. But that's true. That's true.
So
But
like, I raise because I know that I'm limp calling him anyways, but at least I can get some
mhm,
fold equity on the big blind.
mhm. Yeah.
I think I
So
just
he
check back
calls.
this.
Yeah, I think it's fine to check back here. Oh, that's such a terrible God.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll
snap
just check it
checks.
down.
Yeah.
Hopefully he doesn't have like
Huh.
queen 8. Never mind, he doesn't have queen 8. Well,
Yeah, no.
yeah, we don't get value, but I just hope he doesn't have a king here, which he certainly could have.
Okay. Yeah, I think the 5-6 is close. I mean, I would say it's probably outside Nash. Um, I'm not 100% sure about that, but my gut instinct is it's not in the Nash range. So the question is, how much wider than Nash can you go against unknown, probably recreational player? I definitely think you can go a bit wider. I'm not sure how much though. So that would, I mean, I don't know if you've probably got your ICM software to hand, but you could check that one afterwards if you wanted to,
Hmm.
if you care enough.
Yeah. Hmm. I don't know what to do with this one, so I just timed out.
Yeah, I think it's fine to fold. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good timing.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I'm not going to fold the 5-6 against an unknown. So my only other play would be to limp. Would you prefer
Yep.
limping there with the 9 big blinds?
Um, Probably, yeah, against that guy, and then just fold if he shoves.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And I mean, again, I think you could almost say min raise might be better than shoving, just because if we expect him to play honestly, uh, he's probably going to shove on us with just the range of hands that he would have called our shove, and then
Hmm.
we actually can lose a lot less.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
I think all those are possibilities, but I'd probably shove. I'd like the shove least in a way.
Yep. Okay. All right. You've convinced me.
Okay, it's a good flop for ace nine.
Hmm. Uh, I feel like I just check.
Yeah. So like this is a hand that I'm quite happy to see a flop with. If I had
Hmm.
a hand that played really badly, like 9-3, I might just like, nearly 3x it because this guy's already limp folded to us once. I think we had like king six off and he limp folded. So I'm assuming that he's going to limp fold
Yep.
and therefore
Oh, you're cutting out a bit there, Tim.
with those
I think Tim's gone. You back, Tim?
I'm back.
All
Okay,
right,
can
he's
you hear
back.
me?
Yep, I can hear you all
Okay,
good.
sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, so saying, it is exploitable, but once you've got the information that someone's capable of limp folding, um, I'd rather not risk my whole stack to find out, whether he's trapping that one time in 20, if he's
Yep.
actually going to just fold to a 3x the same amount. But with the 8-7 there, you can ISO it, but it plays pretty well. So I just feel like, okay, let's see a free flop with this one and go from there.
Yeah, it's like hard to get value in this spot,
Yeah,
on the
I'm
turn,
tempted to
but
check back on that turn.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was as well, but yeah,
Just let him bluff on the river, and then
exactly, because you
either
can't really get
side.
3 streets unless he has a
Yeah,
5, and then you lose anyway.
yeah,
So this hand I think is just strong enough to just shove
yeah, definitely.
rather than 3xing. And I will go for the limp with this one because it's a profitable shove. Oh, actually, the
Mhm.
blinds just went up, so I think
Yeah, I would shove
actually
it.
on these blinds I would shove. But
Yeah.
if it was still blind level 60, I would just limp that. Nice. Well,
Okay.
that's it.
Lucky chum.
Yeah. All right, Tim, that was really good. Definitely,
Nice.
I think that it was good to get a second opinion, and certainly appreciate you coming on the stream. Is there anything you want to say to the stream before you head off to bed for the night?
No, just keep up the great work. I mean, I caught a bit of one of your shows the other day where you shoved, I think Queen Deuce suited for on the bubble and
Oh
got
yeah.
called by Ace Queen, and
Yep.
there was a really lively discussion about that. So
Yep.
and you kind of explained exactly why it was plus EV. So it's a lot of good stuff that you're putting out there. So just yeah, keep it up
That's good.
and
Thanks.
keep spinning those 6x and taking them down.
I'll try. I'll definitely be adding them in. So guys, if you like the session, definitely follow Tim on Twitter. It's Tim at Tim on the Stoop. Is that right?
That's the one. Yeah.
At Tim on the Stoop. Tim is the official coaching and staking partner of the stream, so I'll put his information in the chat if you want to contact him for any of those things. You can just send him an email. And yeah, thanks again, Tim. So have a good sleep.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
All
Best
right,
of luck.
bye.